My next guest is one of our newest TDs. He believes crushing austerity is destroying the country. So he got a chance to meet with the Troika this week, and he's here to give us the real story on them. Will you please welcome our man on the inside, Stephen Donnelly. Will you do your orgasm first? No? Let's leave it.
No, thank you.
So, listen, before we talk about this week and everything, I just wanted to ask you first briefly, because I think people are starting to get to know you. Know, you're not in politics that long. You're one of the new independent TDs who came in this time.
10 months.
Why did you decide at this hour of your life and things and everything, you had a fairly successful career, decide to get into politics?
It was the IMF's fault, I think. In September 2008, I was working in London. I got a phone call. Susan, my wife, phoned me. And she said, the government has just guaranteed the entire liabilities of the banking system. And I thought, no, you know, they couldn't possibly have. That'll bankrupt the country. I had studied, my master's degree was in Harvard Kennedy School, which is the Harvard School of Government. And it was in international development. So they trained, what we were being trained in really was, first of all, how to work in an economy to stop the IMF ever needing to come in.
Right.
If they have to come in, how do you deal with them? And then how do you rebuild your economy such that they can, you know, fly back to Washington and leave us alone?
So your expertise were precisely for a situation like the one we were lurching into?
Well, my study was, I was working in McKinsey, working in turning around public sector organisations. But yeah, I'd had 2 years studying this stuff full time. So when I heard what the government had done, I sat down and ran some of the numbers and sent an email to some colleagues saying, look, here's the debt, here's the deficit, here's what the government's just done. There's a good chance the IMF is going to end up in Ireland. And there were some raised eyebrows at that. Fast forward, do you remember there was a Monday, it was the 6 o'clock news, I was sitting down and having been told there's no IMF, there's no negotiation and so forth, we saw, do you remember the three guys that they were walking through the streets of Dublin? And I think when I saw that, I felt sick, because I knew from college, from the postgrad work, what happens when the IMF comes into a country. I had colleagues and friends who've worked for the IMF. They know what the IMF does, and I've had colleagues and friends who've been in countries where the IMF has come in. So I really felt sick. And I think ultimately it came down to, I said, look, you can't almost bankrupt yourself and your wife to go to Harvard to learn all of this stuff, and then when the IMF come into your own country, not do something. So there was an election coming up. I had never been involved in politics at all. I was more of a sort of a policy wonk.
Yeah.
And I was at a rugby game, and I was chatting to some friends and said, look, I've got to get involved, I've got to do something. And one of them said, you run, and I'll help, and other people will help. And we watched the game, and it grew over the next few days. And about a week or two later, I said, right, I'll do it. And I spoke to a few people I knew who were involved in politics or who were involved in the civil service, and said, I've got a great idea. I'm gonna run for Parliament. And they said, you're out of your mind. You haven't a hope. You know, you've no money, you've no profile, you've no party, you've no manifesto, you've very little hair. The chances of you getting elected are almost nil. And the election is in 3 months. So I decided to ignore all of that advice.
And you got in?
Yeah, I got in. I took the 5th seat in Wicklow, East Carlow. And
you haven't done badly, I think. I mean, I think you've made a bit of impact there and everything. But then it all comes kind of full circle. We didn't just get the IMF, of course. We might have been better off we did. We got the Troika. And this week, as part of the delegation from the technical group,
that's right, you
got to meet with the Troika.
Yeah.
So, firstly, we talk about the Troika and stuff. Who are these people that you actually met? Like, where are they from? What are they?
So there's 3 mission chiefs. The Troika is the ECB, European Central Bank, the International Monetary Fund, and the European Commission. So we had Klaus, who's the mission chief from the ECB. We had a guy called Craig Beaumont, who's the IMF's mission chief. He's the guy here. And then Istvan, I can't pronounce the second name very well, and he's the mission chief for the European Commission. So we had a long table in the Department of Finance. We had the 7 of us sitting down one end. We had the 3 guys and their staff flanking them on the other on the other side.
And these are essentially kind of bureaucrats, civil servants.
They're technocrats, yeah. I mean, at least two of them. The ECB guy, Klaus, and the IMF guy are economists. And I don't know what the background of the other guy is. He's a bureaucrat. So two technocrats and a diplomat, I guess.
What impression did you get? What do they think of us and our situation?
So
as people, like?
It was one of the things that really struck me. We were with them for about 90 minutes. We were discussing a range of different things. And what was fascinating about finally getting to meet them, rather than having to kind of guess what's going on in the room the whole time, was to get the human element, was to get the emotional side of this thing. Because obviously any negotiation, there's a lot of economics, there's a lot of technical stuff, but then, a lot of it is human. And what really struck me was they don't view us the way we view ourselves. We view ourselves as victims to a large extent. There is an argument that says we brought a certain amount of this upon ourselves. Yes, we did. But certainly within, you've got to pay the bondholders and you've got to bail out these ridiculous banks and you got, all these things. We are dealing with horrific cuts to education, horrific cuts to healthcare. It's all going to get a lot worse. And there's this immorality of us sort of paying all this money to these anonymous people.
But they see it how?
They see us as a wealthy country that guaranteed our own banking system, that borrowed a vast amount of money, that is being bailed out with European money.
Do they still think that we have equality? So they're from where?
I think Germany, England or Australia and Hungary. I think the three
so the
guys.
Hungarian guy clearly is coming over here thinking these people don't know they're born. Presumably he thinks us complaining is ludicrous, like that we have a great standard of life still here, yeah?
Yeah. I mean, I think they recognise that we're having to do difficult things, but certainly it was said, you've got services and there's cuts to those services, but you still have services that people in other parts of Europe would give their eye teeth for. They made a point several times. They said, look, you're looking for debt write-downs, but you pay some people in your civil service and in your public service, several times what we pay our equivalents. It's just not credible for you to come to us and look for massive write-downs in debt, which the European Commission guy was saying, this is European taxpayers' money, whilst you pay some people within your public sector an awful lot of cash. And I think that really was the human element. I think they may view us as a little pampered and kind of throwing our toys a little. And that, by the way, I mean, there is some, you can understand to an extent the argument on the some of the senior civil servants. It fits with an anecdote I heard from an MEP a few months back. She said a French delegation of senior civil servants had come out of one of these meetings and said, we've just met our counterparts from Ireland. They're paid twice what we're paid to run a country that we could fit in our pockets. You got to be kidding. Was
it hard then? So you're presumably trying to tell them about how difficult austerity is for us and the cuts we're seeing in health and education and all that. Yeah?
No, not really. I was trying to challenge them on the technicalities of their approach. I was trying to say, look, you're forcing an austerity-based approach. There's no stimulus. There's no printing of money, which people would normally do if they had their own currency. There's no debt write-downs. Is it possible that Joseph Stiglitz, the Nobel economist, and Krugman, and Rubini, and 200 years of evidence are right, and that this thing you're trying to do, which has never worked before anywhere, is wrong? Is it possible that you've got this wrong?
To which I presume they say to you, well, look, guys, you're taking in X, you're spending Y. The austerity is just asking you to live within your means, isn't it? Isn't that what the austerity is? Like, we moan and moan about it, but in fact, it's just that we can't keep spending more of other people's money, isn't that?
Well, there's two bits to it, isn't there? There is the deficit.
Yeah.
And then I think most people would say, you got to close it.
Yeah.
Right? You do have to make cuts. You do have to increase charges and taxes. There's no question about that.
And so you're going to say the other element here is the bank debt, yes? And you think that's...
Well, it's two things, right? It's the debt and it's the conditions imposed upon us. So you could have the debt and you could have to deal with the deficit, but I think you still have to have some large-scale stimulus. You've got to spend a few billion euros, probably in a few different places, creating jobs. It's what countries do. Now, interestingly, they did say to us, you can use potentially the sale of state assets for this. Within the MOU, it says you can't. It says you've got to use it to pay down the debt. But one thing that was quite interesting politically was that the line we always hear from the government, the Troika's making us do it. Like every time, and I sit in the Dáil every week and I hear it several times a week, is not our fault, the Troika's making us do it.
Yeah.
They went to great lengths to explain to us that they're not. They said, we take the targets very seriously. You've got to close the deficit.
Okay, but within that,
how you do
it's
it,
up to you.
You're a sovereign nation. You know, go for it. Come up with some ideas.
Can we go back to the debt for a minute and some idea of getting a break on that? The thing that has kind of crystallised for a lot of people this week is, you know, that Anglo debt with the 31, well, mainly Anglo debt, 31 million, which we're paying back these promissory notes, without getting into too much detail. We're going to pay back 47 billion. So the effective interest rate, depending on who you listen, is about 8% or something. Noonan seems to be saying that the Troika were implying that we could do something about this. Do you genuinely believe that they are going to give us a break on say, that portion of the debt?
I think it would be very surprising for Noonan and others to be hinting as strongly as they are that there's something good coming. If there wasn't, I think that I think he's. If nothing, he's a wily politician.
He is, isn't he?
You know,
yeah. But you don't think they've done this before? They've brought up these promissory notes before, haven't they? And I was looking back and I was wondering, and this could be conspiracy theories now, but do they bring it up every time there's going to be another whack paid out to unsecured, unguaranteed Anglo bondholders? Like Wednesday, we're paying out $1.5 billion. I noticed in December they brought it up when there was another big payout. But do you believe that they are actually out there having these kind of negotiations that they're hinting at? You do, obviously.
Yeah. I think it would be very strange for Noonan to be saying that they're not. My concern is what the government's going to do is come back and say, look, this 31 billion euros, 25 of which we've lobbed into the bank formerly known as Anglo. Great news. You know, we were going to have to borrow it at X%, and we've just had a few percentage points shaved off it. Carl Whelan, the UCD economist, who's a mainstream guy, you know, worked in the central bank, worked in the States, is arguing very strongly, don't pay it, right? So in sometime at the end of March, we're going to write a cheque for 3.1 billion euros. We're going to do it every year for the next 10 years.
So starting this year?
Starting in a few weeks.
And pay off that Anglo debt?
Yeah, so basically the money goes into Anglo. The vast majority, 25 to 31
Let's
is for
not get
Anglo.
too technical.
Right, it goes in.
Saturday night.
Sorry. Yeah. And the Irish Central Bank makes most of it disappear. So it's dead money. So at a time when we are screaming for money for care assistance and DESH schools and all of those things,
we're essentially retiring $3 billion every year.
The government's going to put its arms around billions of euros of taxes, bring it in, lob it over to the central bank, and they're going to say, right, that money doesn't exist anymore.
Okay. So can I ask you, and I know you're going to be reluctant to kind of criticise it, guys, but do you think, okay, you're clearly well qualified in this area, you seem to know what you're talking about. A lot of guys out there like Whelan and all these other guys. Are the people who are doing the negotiating for us in these situations? Is Noonan a school teacher? Yes.
Years ago, I mean, he's a politician. He's a professional politician.
So he's a professional politician, which is a kind of a skill set all of its own about getting elected. He was a teacher, which is about crowd control, whatever. Are these the guys we want out there actually negotiating at the most critical time ever, probably in the history of the country, when we could go over a precipice? Are they the right guys to be doing this?
I don't know. I hope so. I mean, Noonan is...
Jeez, that's hardly enough, is it? Well, actually, look, hopefully it'll work out.
I mean, Michael Noonan, he's not an economist, but he understands the facts and figures, you know. I mean, he's been involved in this for a great many years. My concern is more with the people they have advising them,
okay,
right?
is that the same Department of Finance that, more or less?
Yeah, so Gareth Fitzgerald in 2006 did a report on the Department of Finance. Now, this was when it was all beginning to go very badly wrong. And he said, you have 3 macroeconomists in the entire department, and only one of them is actually working in macroeconomics. Now, that's bad news.
Do we need to get rid of the Department of Finance as is, as was, and just hire a bunch of new guys?
I don't know if we have to get rid of it, but I would love to see them hiring in a lot more technically proficient people from here and abroad.
So it's not fit for the job at the moment, you reckon?
I don't think it is.
And the job at the moment is so important.
I mean, there are good, smart, hard-working people in there.
Everywhere, yeah.
But I saw a figure recently, I think we've got something like 20% have masters or PhDs in economics or finance, and in Canada it's 40 and in the Netherlands it's 60. Now, those figures aren't right, but we're way down in terms of...
Can I ask you quickly before you go? So you're kind of telling us what we're doing wrong and everything. You're made Minister for Finance in the morning, say. Give me in a nutshell now. I want one sentence each, okay? No, getting complicated with us. Give me a few prescriptions. What are the first things you do to kind of get us out of this mess? Is there a way out of this mess?
Yeah, there is. There always is, right? It's about how much pain we have to take over the next 10 years to get out of it. Number one, sort out the national debt. Bondholders' promissory notes have a completely different approach to the negotiations, with a lot more technical, engage with the citizens of Europe and say, you're not bailing us out, the money's all leaving Ireland, we're actually bailing your banks out, and so forth. I think there's a lot more can be done. Engage the technocrats at their game, force them to prove that their plan, which is not going to work, is going to work, and open that up.
Okay.
Right.
Next.
Mortgage debt. It's killing the country. And a particular age group, but it's killing the country. And the banks are not passing on the money. We have given billions of euros to the banks, ring-fenced to deal with distressed mortgages. We've had them into the Finance Committee. How much have you passed on?
So they have the money
zero.
actually to start forgiving mortgage debt. Yeah, that money was built into the to the banking bailout.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And the
give
bank,
me one more.
The bank education. We've got to invest a lot more money in education.
Completely, except that we're doing quite the opposite at the moment, aren't we?
Yeah.
It's extraordinary.
We've had the big...
And education, with the smart economy and the rest of it, education will prepare us to be ready for the next time things come around.
Our education system is falling year on year and year and year.
Okay.
And we've got to sort it out. It requires a lot of changes in working practice, but it requires a lot of money as well.
Okay, well look, I'm sure we will do all or absolutely none of those things. But anyway, it's been great talking to you. Ladies and gentlemen, Stephen Donnelly TV.